Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we share heartfelt tales that challenge assumptions and inspire change. Today's story takes us to a luxury car dealership in Austin, Texas, where a humble man walks in unnoticed, only to reveal himself as the new owner. What unfolds is a lesson in leadership, humility, and respect. On a warm, golden afternoon in Austin, Texas, Marcus Hayes pulled into the parking lot of Elite Autos, his newest business venture. The luxury car dealership was renowned for its pristine reputation, offering high-end vehicles to an elite clientele. From the moment Marcus acquired the dealership, he had been curious about its inner workings, the culture, the staff, and most importantly, how the customers were treated. Today, dressed in a simple gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, and sneakers, Marcus wasn't just the owner. He was an observer, stepping into his own business as an ordinary man. Marcus parked his modest SUV in an unmarked spot at the back of the lot, away from the lineup of gleaming luxury vehicles. The sleek, polished cars practically glowed under the bright afternoon sun, their surfaces reflecting the clear blue sky. He took a moment to look at the building, its glass facade giving it an air of exclusivity. He smiled slightly, his demeanor relaxed but purposeful. Today wasn't about showing authority. It was about seeing the truth. As he entered the dealership, the blast of cool air conditioning was a sharp contrast to the warmth outside. The scent of leather and wax filled the air, a sensory reminder of the luxury cars that surrounded him. The staff, casually chatting near the front desk, fell silent as Marcus walked in. He felt their eyes flicker to his outfit, his hoodie and sneakers out of place in this world of tailored suits and designer shoes. Among them was Jennifer, the dealership's manager, a woman whose sharp features and tailored blazer exuded authority. She carried herself with confidence, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of efficiency. As her gaze landed on Marcus, her expression shifted subtly. The polite smile she wore seemed tight, forced, as though she were already making assumptions about him. Jennifer approached with a professional air, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone clipped but polite. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus smiled warmly, his posture relaxed. "I'm just here to look around," he said casually, gesturing to the cars on display. Jennifer's eyes scanned him from head to toe, and though she kept her smile, there was an unmistakable flicker of doubt in her gaze. "Are you shopping for a car?" she asked, her tone betraying a hint of skepticism. Marcus nodded, keeping his voice light. "Something like that." Her lips tightened slightly. "Well," she said carefully, "we cater to a very specific clientele here. Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification. Perhaps I could recommend." Before she could finish, another staff member interrupted, calling her attention to a delivery. Jennifer turned briefly, but quickly snapped her focus back to Marcus, her gaze wary, as though worried he might wander too close to one of the luxury cars. "You're assuming I'm not qualified," Marcus said, his voice calm but direct. Jennifer hesitated for a moment, but her composure quickly returned. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she replied with a tight smile. "These vehicles start at six figures. Maybe I can direct you to—" Marcus let her words hang in the air for a moment, the subtle sting of her assumptions unmistakable. He stepped closer to a sleek silver coupe, its aggressive design catching his eye. His fingers brushed the door handle lightly, and he glanced back at Jennifer. "Nice car," he said simply. Jennifer's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly regained it, though it looked more strained than before. "It is," she said crisply. "Perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment. For now, I'll have to ask you not to touch the vehicles." Marcus stood there for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets, and gestured for her to continue. "All right," he said, his tone calm. "Let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" Her mask of professionalism cracked slightly, revealing a flicker of impatience. She straightened her shoulders and gave him a tight smile. "Maybe something a little more budget-friendly," she said. "I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Marcus tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "That's quite the assumption," he said softly. Jennifer hesitated, her confidence wavering for the first time. I'm just being realistic, she said. Prestige autos isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time. A faint smile played on Marcus's lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. He nodded once and gestured to the cars around them. You don't think I belong here, do you? Jennifer stiffened slightly, her hands gripping her clipboard. I didn't say that, she replied, her voice defensive. You didn't have to, Marcus said evenly, his calm demeanor never wavering. The tension between them was palpable, the quiet judgment in Jennifer's tone cutting through the air like a knife. Around them, a few staff members glanced over, their conversations quieting as they noticed the exchange. Marcus took a slow breath, then said, I'd like to speak to the owner. Think you can make that happen? Jennifer blinked, caught off guard. Her forced smile returned, though it looked more strained than ever. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits, she said with a dismissive laugh. They're a busy person. Marcus nodded, his tone still light. I'm sure they are, but maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they want to meet me. Her expression shifted to frustration, her patience clearly wearing thin. Sir, if you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with a sales consultant. Otherwise, Marcus raised an eyebrow, his calm expression unchanging. Otherwise what? Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave, Jennifer said, her voice firm. Marcus studied her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. All right, he said, scrolling through his contacts. I'll make the call myself. Jennifer's confidence faltered, confusion flickering across her face. What are you doing? Calling the owner. Marcus replied simply, lifting the phone to his ear. Shouldn't take long. The room seemed to hold its breath as Marcus made the call, his voice calm and steady. It's me, he said into the phone. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine. Just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? As he ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, Jennifer's face paled. Who did you just call? She asked, her voice unsteady. Marcus glanced around the showroom, his gaze lingering on the staff who were now watching intently. Guess we'll find out, he said, his tone almost playful. And with that, the stage was set for a moment that would change everything. The air in the elite auto showroom felt charged, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something monumental to happen. Marcus Hayes stood casually by a gleaming luxury SUV, his hands in his pockets, his calm demeanor unshaken by the tension around him. Jennifer, the dealership manager, had retreated a few paces, her polished confidence giving way to visible unease. She clutched her clipboard tightly, as though it were a shield against the growing sense that something wasn't quite right. The staff, scattered throughout the showroom, exchanged hushed whispers, their glances flicked between Marcus and Jennifer, the unease growing with every passing second. No one said it out loud, but they all felt the same thing. They were on the verge of witnessing something they wouldn't soon forget. The sound of the front doors opening broke the heavy silence. A sharply dressed man in a tailored navy suit stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. His confident stride carried him straight to Marcus, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to warmth the moment their eyes met. Mr. Hayes, the man said, extending his hand with a wide smile. So good to see you. Marcus returned the handshake with a firm grip, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thanks for coming, John. I appreciate it. The room collectively stiffened. Jennifer's clipboard nearly slipped from her hands as she stared at the two men, her eyes darting between them as though trying to piece together a puzzle that was rapidly unraveling. Wait, Mr. Hayes? Jennifer echoed, her voice uncertain, barely above a whisper. John, the dealership's regional director, turned to Jennifer, his expression shifting from warm to curt in an instant. I see you've already met Mr. Hayes, he said, his tone sharp enough to cut through the air. Jennifer blinked, her mouth opening and closing as though searching for the right words. I didn't realize that he's the new owner of this dealership. John finished for her, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Jennifer froze, her polished demeanor crumbling like a house of cards. The clipboard she had clutched so tightly now seemed to weigh her down. I didn't know, she stammered, her voice barely audible. Marcus raised a hand, his calm voice cutting through the tension. It's all right, John, he said, his gaze briefly flicking to Jennifer. I think Jennifer and I just got off on the wrong foot. But there was a weight to his words, a quiet authority that made everyone in the room hang on to them. His tone was gentle, but the underlying message was unmistakable. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a moment of reckoning. Jennifer's face turned ashen. She took a small step back, her hands clutching the clipboard to her chest, as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Marcus interrupted, his tone still calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. You didn't mean to assume someone like me couldn't afford a car here? That I didn't belong? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked utterly lost. I didn't mean, she began, but the words died in her throat. Marcus held up a hand, silencing her gently but firmly. It's fine, Jennifer. Really, he said, taking a step closer. His voice dropped just enough to make everyone in the room lean in. But let me ask you something. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have given me the same respect you'd give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of Marcus's question hung heavy in the air, pressing down on everyone present. Marcus nodded slowly, as though her silence was answer enough. He turned to John, his voice steady and clear. Let's gather everyone in the conference room, he said. I think it's time we had a little chat about how things are run around here. John nodded immediately, stepping aside to ensure Marcus's request was carried out without delay. The staff, now a mix of nervous energy and quiet curiosity, began filing into the sleek, glass-walled conference room at the back of the dealership. Jennifer lingered for a moment, her usual confident stride replaced by hesitant, almost timid steps, as Marcus turned to follow the others. He glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. Let's talk, he said simply, the weight of his authority unmistakable. Inside the conference room, the air was thick with tension. The modern design glass walls, sleek furnishings, and soft lighting suddenly felt stifling, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Jennifer sat near the back, her shoulders stiff, her usual commanding presence replaced by a nervous stillness. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his calm demeanor commanding the attention of everyone in the room. He took a moment to scan the faces before him, the staff who would now look to him for leadership, and began to speak. Thank you all for joining me on short notice, Marcus said, his tone measured but firm. For those of you who don't know, my name is Marcus Hayes. As of last month, I'm the new owner of Elite Autos. There were murmurs of surprise, some faces showing embarrassment while others reflected curiosity. Jennifer sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Marcus continued, his voice steady. I came here today dressed casually for a reason. I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what a potential customer might feel walking through these doors. He paused, letting the words settle. What I experienced today was disappointing, he said, his voice calm but carrying a quiet weight. I was judged, not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked, and I'm not here to single anyone out. But we need to talk about what that says about the culture of this dealership. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed. Marcus's gaze briefly flicked to her before returning to the group as a whole. This isn't just about me, he said, his tone softening slightly. It's about every person who walks through those doors. Every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived notion of what a luxury car buyer looks like. As Marcus spoke, the tension in the room began to shift. What had started as a moment of confrontation was transforming into an opportunity for reflection. The staff leaned in, listening intently, their initial unease giving way to a sense of purpose. For Marcus, this wasn't just about correcting a single manager's mistake. It was about laying the foundation for a culture built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness, one that would define Elite Autos moving forward. The conference room at Elite Autos fell silent as Marcus Hayes stood at the head of the table. The staff, seated around him, seemed frozen in place, their eyes fixed on the calm but commanding figure of their new boss. The glass walls of the room, which normally exuded transparency and openness, now reflected the tension in the air. The weight of Marcus's words from earlier still hung heavy, lingering like a quiet storm. Marcus's gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on Jennifer, who sat near the back, her once confident posture replaced by nervous stillness. Her clipboard lay forgotten on the table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marcus's expression was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority in his presence. "Let me start by saying this," Marcus began, his voice measured but firm. "I didn't come here today to humiliate anyone or to point fingers. That's not what this is about. I came here to understand the culture of this dealership, the culture I've inherited, and to see where we stand." The room remained silent, the faint hum of the air conditioning the only sound. Marcus let the quiet stretch for a moment before continuing. "What I saw today was disappointing," he said, his tone softening slightly but still resolute. "I was judged not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked. And while that judgment was directed at me, it could just as easily have been directed at any customer walking through those doors." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed. She avoided eye contact with Marcus, her hands twisting nervously. Marcus's gaze moved to her briefly, but his words were directed at everyone. "This isn't just about me," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "It's about the culture we're building here. It's about ensuring that every person who walks into this dealership, whether they're dressed in a suit or a hoodie, is treated with respect and dignity. Because that's what defines true excellence, not just the cars we sell, but the experience we provide." A young sales associate raised his hand hesitantly. Marcus nodded toward him, encouraging him to speak. "Mr. Hayes," the man began, his voice nervous but sincere. "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions. It's not intentional." But he trailed off, unsure how to finish. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate your honesty," he said. "And you're right, biases, whether we like to admit it or not, are part of human nature. But here's the thing, it's not enough to simply try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We have to create an environment where everyone feels respected, regardless of their appearance, background, or anything else." The staff murmured quietly, some nodding in agreement. Even Jennifer, though visibly uncomfortable, seemed to be listening intently. Marcus continued, his tone growing more resolute. "This dealership has built a reputation for excellence. But excellence isn't just about the cars we sell. It's about how we treat people. And from this moment forward, that experience is going to be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness. No exceptions." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he turned his attention back to Jennifer. "Jennifer," he said gently but firmly, "I want to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to her, the room holding its collective breath. Jennifer hesitated, her cheeks flushed, her usually confident voice barely audible when she finally spoke. I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I misjudged you. And for that, I'm truly sorry." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I hope this experience will serve as a reminder, not just for you, but for all of us, that we can't afford to make assumptions about anyone. Because every customer who walks through those doors deserves the same respect, the same dignity." Jennifer nodded, her eyes downcast. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Marcus's tone softened slightly, though it remained firm. "I believe in second chances," he said, "but accountability comes first. We'll have a one-on-one meeting later to discuss next steps. For now, let's focus on moving forward." He turned his attention back to the group. "Moving forward. We'll be implementing new training programs to ensure that this dealership reflects the values I believe in, values of respect, inclusivity, and fairness. These programs won't just be about improving customer service. They'll be about challenging our own biases, about creating an environment where everyone feels valued. The room was silent, but the tension had shifted. What had started as a moment of confrontation now felt like an opportunity for growth. The staff seemed to relax slightly, their initial defensiveness giving way to a sense of purpose. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the edge of the table. "Let me make one thing clear," he said. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to lead. And leading means holding ourselves to the highest standards, not just in the cars we sell, but in the way we treat people. That's how we build trust. That's how we create something truly exceptional." He straightened, his gaze sweeping across the room. "If you're on board with that, I'm here to support you every step of the way." There was a murmur of agreement, this time louder and more genuine. Even Jennifer, though visibly shaken, nodded quietly. As the meeting came to a close, the staff began to file out, their steps lighter than before. The initial tension had given way to a sense of renewal, a determination to do better. Jennifer lingered by the door, hesitating for a moment before approaching Marcus. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, her voice low, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. I won't let you down." Marcus looked at her for a moment, his expression steady but kind. "I hope you mean that." "Jennifer," he said, "actions speak louder than words. But I believe people can change if they're willing to try." She nodded earnestly, her eyes meeting his. "I am," she said. Marcus watched her leave before turning to John, who had remained quietly at the back of the room. "Let's set up a follow-up meeting with the staff next week," Marcus said. "I want to make sure everyone knows what's expected moving forward." John grinned, his respect for Marcus evident. "You got it, boss." As Marcus stepped back into the showroom, he glanced around at the gleaming cars, their polished surfaces reflecting the warm afternoon light. There was still much work to be done, but for the first time that day, he felt a quiet optimism. This wasn't just about running a dealership. It was about building a culture of respect, about creating a space where people were judged by their character, not their appearance. And Marcus Hayes was ready to lead the way. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey of transformation and understanding. Marcus Hayes' story reminds us of the importance of challenging biases and building a culture of respect and fairness. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more inspiring tales that highlight the power of compassion and leadership. Until next time, let's keep striving to see the humanity in everyone.